In 1903, the Edison Company's Edwin S. Porter burst through the silver screen with The Great Train Robbery. It was arguably the first genre western in film lore, and the most commercially successful movie before the epics of D.W. Griffith. The plot is thin, but then the film is only about 10 minutes long. Train robbers force a station master to give a false telegram stopping a train, so more robbers can sneak on board. They quickly conquer the locomotive amid gunfire and beatings, bring it to a stop, and disembark the passengers to be robbed blind. The bandits skedaddle with locomotive and coal car. Meanwhile, back at the station, a young girl discovers the trussed-up station master, and a good old-fashioned hootenanny is busted up with the news. A posse rides forth after the first two bandits, and a shootout finishes the rest. This simple plot has been dissected, reworked, and expanded over the last century over and over. The robbers are the bad guys, the good guys, and everything in between. They might even hijack a train to fight the future. Or rob it to pay the bills, even out in the black. But why elevate Porter's film? Certainly it wasn't the first film to feature trains or crime or even the trappings of the Old West, and there's a certain inevitability in making a heist film involving the land-bound piracy of the modern age. So why this over so many others? A theory. Postmodernism.
It's POMO. Postmodern. Yeah, alright, weird for the sake of weird.
Oh, nice try, Mo. In terms of art, at least, think of the classical world with its strong, clean lines, regular geometrics, and a sense of divine inspiration. The world has rules, but only a sense of sacredness, even if it required elevating the common with ritual, brought you in line with them. But then modernism, starting with Renaissance poets and Shakespeare, brings the agency of human construction buttressed by reason and rules. The supernatural becomes diminished, shackled.
Oh, you Americans with your due process and fair trials. This is always so much easier in Mexico.
Postmodernism sees reason and artifice as even more enshrined than religion, and demands an even further fundamental questioning of existence. Nothing can be taken for granted, all is malleable, and so convention, theory, and standards undergo total reevaluation. Art becomes self-conscious of its own techniques. Constantly. It can get weird.
We knew that, Birkenstocks.
Yeah, explain to us the meaning of life.
Okay, those computer geeks who control you, thing is, they're part of a video game too. You see, the planet Earth is my most immersive, detailed video game yet, and I play it 24 hours a day. It's great. You can get out of your car, have a family. The Simpsons game, your game, is really nothing but a mini-game inside my Earth game. If you think about it.
So, not only are we not real, we're characters inside a minigame inside another game. And the people playing us right now are the characters inside the big game that you're playing.
Well, you're not inside just any game. The planet Earth got a score of 96 on Metacritic.
Huh? God, there is one thing. Do you ever wonder if you're a character in a video game?
That's just dumb. I mean, stop being dumb.
Wow! Daddy, someone's looking at me!
Okay, Mo, you win. Pomo is weird.
I'm a storyteller. I like telling a story, and I like things working as a story. All right, you know, I really like experimenting with a kind of cinema that you're not used to seeing, or taking the form and stretching it and twisting it and doing things that you're not used to seeing all the time.
Of course, despite his claim, Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs does have a century of cinematic experimentation to draw from. The postmodern experiment of self-consciously playing with your perception to create a new reality, exaggerating the disconnected elements of life, is in full swing. And yeah, there's a lot of City of Fire in there. But non-linear postmodern deconstruction hadn't been mainstream for a bit of time, so he could make a big splash. You can also think of the narrative deconstruction and rearrangement heightened in films like Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill as a time-warping use of the meanwhile back at the ranch technique of storytelling.
I'll quote Hitchcock again. He said the name of making movies is Meanwhile Back at the Ranch. He's absolutely right. You want to have two things going. You reach the peak of one, you go to the other.
I hope you know what you're doing.
You pick the other up just where you want it. When it loses interest, drop it. Meanwhile, back at the ranch.
Our train robbery quietly played with this technique. Sure, at first the train robbery looks pretty straightforward, a case of successive and then moments. Bandits attack the boxcar, and then the locomotive, and then round up the passengers, and then, well, you get the picture. When does this happen, though? The arrival of the rescuer is not a cause and effect of the scene before. This moment is untethered. He could be rescued during this scene or this scene. The weaving together of the robbery, the rescue, and the resulting shootout is more untethered in presentation and brought together through clever editing than is immediately apparent. Sure, it's a mite bit clunky, but clever projectionists often recut film strips, rearranging scenes and spicing things up. Kevin Smith is right. Sometimes the door is very small and stupid and you may get shot on the other side, but just going through the door is the thrill of it.
You was gonna let me pick out my own clothes?
Yeah, but of course.
In Porter's attempts to tell a dramatic, gripping story of crime and punishment, there are flashes of obvious film trickery, like the jump cut to the incredibly fake dummy, when they could have contrived a deadly-looking angled shot instead, or the absurdly long shot of passengers exiting the train. What should be a tense moment left me waiting for clowns to pour out after them. But somehow, it all works. Intentionally or not, there's a healthy dose of camp softening the violence, the kind of humdrum that takes place in real life.
These are the greatest movies ever because the scary parts are scary and the funny parts are really funny. Two great tastes that taste great together.
And you know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris?
They don't call it a quarter pounder with cheese?
Oh man, they got the metric system. They wouldn't know what the fuck a quarter pounder is.
And what do they call it?
They call it Royale with cheese.
Royale with cheese.
That's right.
What do they call a Big Mac?
Big Mac's a Big Mac, but they call it Le Big Mac.
Le Big Mac.
Is that the stuff that's really important to you? Like these mundane conversations that hitmen do? Are these conversations that you have with people?
Oh yeah, well the thing is, I think that's what everybody talks about more or less. You know, it's like you know, you never talk about brand X. You always like, you know, say, man, if I had some lava, I could really wash my hands and get this stuff off. You know.
But that can't be enough to cement a legacy. What was the secret ingredient? Postmodernism is inherently challenging, sometimes subversive, sometimes surreal, sometimes shocking, always breaking walls. Audiences no longer surprised by trains shooting towards them at an angle face gunfire head on, sometimes before the story, sometimes after. If you wanted to keep trains in films, you followed suit. And aesthetic violence?
I'm ready. Let's do it right now, right here. Come on.
All right. Same as last time, remember?
I love you, Pumpkin.
I love you, honey bunny.
Everybody be cool, this is a robbery!
All aboard for Night Train. Miami, Florida.
Yeah, well, it's a movie. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy. It's not real life. It's a fantasy. You go and you watch, you know, you watch a kung fu movie, and one guy takes on 100 people in a restaurant. That's fun.
Of course, being so brash, brazen, and energetic cinematically occasionally bleeds into real life.
Tarantino revealed his opinion of Ava DuVernay's Selma, which was largely left out of last year's Oscar race, leading many to criticize the Academy for its exclusion. Tarantino said, if people don't like my movies, they don't like my movies, and if they don't get it, it doesn't matter. She did a really good job on Selma, but Selma deserved an Emmy.
DuVernay shot back. She said about Tarantino, I was surprised by how surprised everyone was. When you look at his work and his persona, there's nothing surprising about what he said. But DuVernay let the world know his comments didn't faze her.
With a filmography of about 20 years, what does it mean to say we know what Tarantino is like, at least when it comes to film? Unorthodox, self-conscious narrative structure? Everyday folly amid absurd insanity?
Okay, I'm confused. Are the bags on or off?
I think we all think the bag was a nice idea.
Yeah.
But not pointing any fingers. They could have been done better. Auf Wiedersehen.
Explosive violence? Iconic, extremely spacious shots? Or even stylized close-ups? Every shot is a painting in a frame. See the light from the hamburger wrapper in his eyes? Smooth. Emmys are for excellence in television. Oscars for cinema. which sounds like an elitist or merely technical distinction. But let's dig a little deeper.
I'm the only one who's not dramatically doing anything. I need information now.
Television filming techniques depend more heavily on static establishing shots, consistent enclosed sets, and 4-camera coverage of scenes. Time and money usually demands quick turnaround and a more industrial approach and technique. This is by no means universal. Dramas are typically given wider creative range, and the advent of high-quality cable series drives production value up exponentially.
There'll be spectacle, there'll be fantasy, there'll be daring do and stuff like you would never see.
But in cinema, the emphasis on spectacle and storytelling with closure creates opportunities for more variety and complexity of visual and auditory presentation. The grammar between the two isn't any different, but its application is often the difference between a short story and a novel, a poem and an epic. Later, Tarantino admitted to not even having seen Selma yet when he made his Emmy comment. But I don't think it's intended as a direct dig anyhow, but more a result of his intense emphasis on aesthetics in film. And at times, the problem with a message movie is that the content can override the quality of presentation. Tarantino has a knee-jerk reaction against that tendency, born of his love of genre innovations and creativity within their severe limitations. But when it comes to Selma, are those concerns valid?
This is art. This is a movie. This is a film. I'm not a historian. I'm not a documentarian.
Well, I have seen Selma. It's a very good movie. But as art, there are some critiques to be made. I'm not going to dwell on the historical debates surrounding the film or try to defend Tarantino's character. When he criticizes others, he does tend to come across as an attention-seeking, overgrown man-child.
Who can it be? Quentin Tarantino walks out. A weird-looking little motherfucker. Wide-set eyes. He has the metabolic rate of an animal that can run on a wheel for hours at a time. He's like... He's sweating. It's weird. He comes out, he grabs the mic and starts banging it with the flat of his hand. Is this thing on? Is this thing on? People are like, God, it's just killing me. He goes, you know what I think of doing? Earlier today, I was thinking of getting 500 rats and waiting for Kill Bill to start and then unleashing the rats so they attack you Hollywood people. Ha, ha, ha. 1,500 people politely applaud a man who wants to have rats attack them. He wants to attack us with rats. Just go with it.
I just want to examine Selma on its own terms as a work of cinema. First off, yes, as even Tarantino claimed, it's an excellent movie. The story moves at a solid pace, the leads give fine performances, and in each scene, the script is tight. Mass group scenes are magnificently staged, and the first turn away from Selma is chilling. But the movie lacks focus at times. I lose track of whether I'm watching a film about Martin Luther King Jr. or a broader film about the Selma Montgomery March and civil rights fight. I'm sure the FBI are bad guys, but it's an amorphous evil depersonalized by log reports typed over the screen. And the local cops and racist onlookers aren't more complicated than caricatures. I feel more nuance and vitriol, both from and for this petty clerk, who is enjoying the banal evil he can inflict again and again. Now that's systemic racism. And here's Oprah Winfrey. She has so much presence, so much expressive talent, yet she only appears in a handful of scenes, almost as scenery.
Knowing a little bit more about King, that he's more than I Have a Dream. He's more than the mountaintop speech. He did more than believe in peace and was assassinated. He was a living, breathing, radical, charismatic, dynamic man.
If I wanted to follow a radical character, to emphasize the radical nature of King's dream, it's strange I'm more compelled by her brief appearances than King's constant presence.
And so basically what I did was break down the cadence, the rhythm of King, some of the tricks that he would use to get people going. But the real thing was just to get underneath the idea. What was he trying to say in these? It was, you know what, it was less challenging because I just kind of got in pocket at some point and really just, freed myself, untethered myself from the words. Once you do that and you really think about his ideas, which were bold, which were radical, which were exciting, then it's just me restating the ideas to you with a few different words.
It's certainly not DuVernay's fault that the King estate remains obnoxiously tight-fisted about their monopoly on some of America's greatest oration. But I worry that being in pocket as a means to disregard the words as words and distill the ideas into a new form suffered mightily in translation. The aesthetic of speaking, especially for King, informed his quest. More importantly, from a cinematic viewpoint, I don't think the speeches carried nearly enough weight.
There are only so many Gwen Eiffels and Smarty Pantses around that know that those aren't the real words. Most people walk out of the film not aware that those are not King's actual words that David Oyelowo was speaking in the speeches.
Unfortunately, I'm one of those smarty pants. I've read many of his speeches, thoroughly devoured Why We Can't Wait, listened to his recordings. Trying to run away from his style and yet hoping to catch his spirit just strikes me as unequivocally contradictory. Please, Never approach your audience assuming ignorance. Admittedly, my knowledge actually hurts one of the most beautifully shot and edited sequences in the film. Historically, the 1964 Nobel Prize acceptance comes more than a year after the 1963 Baptist church bombing. But time warping for the sake of juxtaposing the struggle for peace against ever-present violence is the kind of poetic license cinema carries well. At first, the children seem disconnected from the previous scene. I don't know this is the infamous bombing. But as the boys drop behind and 4 girls separate from the last to walk out of frame, I know. The only shock will be how it's portrayed. It's gorgeous. But then I feel a tad guilty that the single most visually interesting shot in the film, the one I aesthetically linger on, is morbid. Good night, sweet princesses. Some scenes, which should be far more powerful, are inhibited by lackluster blocking and coverage. Here, a medium shot of Coretta, and then a medium shot of Martin, and then, close-up, slight angle change, and then it's a maddening ping-pong match. It feels like theater blocking when she finally stands. What should be an intense scene falls flat. Time and again, actors are staged in 2 shots with no master shot until maybe the end of the scene, or they just play toss with their lines. Group shots captured the chaos of fractured argument, but in the sense of being chaotic to follow. I respect, even applaud DuVernay's insistence on giving historical figures their own individuality. But scenes like this reinforce why multiple characters in historical movies and biopics often become amalgamations. You have a lens to tell your story through, and this requires focus. And saying you don't want to be held to documentarian standards, but by standards of artistic interpretation, becomes murky with the inclusion of documentary footage. If you want to integrate it and retain the freedom of dramatic license, heck, if you want to stage a crowded scene and highlight an argument, show just how unexpectedly subversive King can be, and creatively edit and expand your field of storytelling all in one scene, try this.
The buildings beyond the wall, but there is also a machine gun down the street to the left.
Dr. King, you might want to lie down with that fever.
President Johnson is making a tragic error in Vietnam. Move over.
Big Yellow. Why should we fight in Vietnam?
Well, what do your daddy do?
He's a butler.
The black domestic played an important role in our history.
I didn't tell you that to make fun of me.
Young brother, the black domestic defy racial stereotypes by being hardworking and trustworthy. He slowly tears down racial hatred with his example of a strong work ethic and dignified character. Now, while we perceive the butler or the maid to be subservient, in many ways they are subversive without even knowing it.
Take these criticisms with a pound of salt. Selma is a very good film. Ava DuVernay spent a long time toiling away in the less glamorous side of the business with PR and organizing before she could really get behind the camera and direct. I've seen I Will Follow. It's great, and for a much smaller film avoids nearly every technical flaw I see in Selma. Middle of Nowhere is probably just as good, and it's on my must-see list. She can direct visually distinctive and emotionally resonant narrative films. Just check out this slice of life moment in I Will Follow, with an interesting camera angle, playfully real dialogue, and a great object-gaze relationship. It's just less salty than a Tarantino dialogue.
No, this is in good shape.
Good shape? What do you mean, like Michael Phelps good shape or Monique good shape? Because as soon as we pull this off the wall, it's gonna fall apart.
No, this is good wood.
Come on, you know this is plywood.
It's going to Goodwill.
Right, Goodwill, not half-ass will.
Need to take it to Goodwill.
Why'd you even buy this? Why don't you just sit it out on the curb, let somebody come through and get it?
Look, no one is driving through this neighborhood looking for wood.
Have you tried Greg's List? Greg might want it.
I tell you what. How about we take all the little broken up pieces, stack them in a nice little neat pile, and leave it out at the curb for you?
It's not going to break up.
I wish the Jonas Brothers would break up.
Okay, so now I play one Jonas Brothers song, and
One
now
too
you got
many.
something to say about that?
One too many.
One too
feel
many.
how I feel,
You
man.
can feel how you
Who
want to
man
feel, but you're
listens
gonna be
to
looking
the
for a
Jonas
place to
Brothers?
stay.
It's a little creepy, man.
We're finally achieving what Chris Rock called for at the Oscars in 2005.
See, at least they make movies for white people to enjoy. Real movies with plots, with actors, not rappers, with real names, like Catch Me If You Can, like Saving Private Ryan. Black movies don't have real names. You get names like Barbershop. That's not a name, that's just a location. barbershop, cookout, car wash. They've been making the same movie for 40 years. That's right, you know Laundromat's coming soon. And after that, check cash in place.
Yes, Selma, is a place. Well, it's still a very good film. The Butler is a great film, and say what you will about holding up another slave narrative as a standard, 12 Years a Slave is so amazing in about every regard that they really should invent new awards just for their cinematic achievement. It's amazing to realize that Selma truly is the first feature film focused on Martin Luther King Jr., which is a shame, and that DuVernay as a woman of color is a small minority among an already small minority of directors. Another crying shame. There's still a lot of potential in her directing career, and I hope she has the juice now to put out something that stretches her talent even further. After all, Kevin Smith was right. The first one through the door.
Yo, Ticket to Ride, the white crime highway.
I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments. And I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism. And I think the realistic fact is that we still have a long, long way to go.
Hallelujah!